Humanity had long been a forgotten speck in the grand tapestry of the galaxy. For centuries, Earth had existed in isolation, overlooked by the powerful empires of the cosmos. The humans had lived their lives in relative peace, developing technologies that allowed them to explore the stars, but never fully engaging with the galaxy's more advanced civilizations. They were seen as curious, but ultimately unimportant. Then came the Xenari. The ancient, proud race arrived, their ships emerging from the dark void like shadows. They were a force to be reckoned with, towering, powerful beings with advanced technology, far beyond anything humanity had ever dreamed of. They had conquered planets, dominated star systems, and created an empire that stretched across the galaxy. Earth, they said, had the potential to join their galactic dominion, to serve as another piece in their sprawling empire. But only if humanity accepted their place beneath the Xenari's rule. At first, there was hesitation. The Xenari came with promises of advanced technology, protection, and prosperity. But beneath their seemingly noble offer was a harsh truth, an ultimatum. Humanity was not invited to join the galaxy as an equal. They were offered the chance to submit, to kneel before the Xenari as lesser beings. Their independence, their freedom, would be stripped away piece by piece. Most humans saw the writing on the wall. They understood the price of acceptance. To bow to the Xenari would be to lose everything they had fought for as a species, and that for many was unacceptable. The whispers began. We will not be slaves. In the beginning, the resistance was small, almost laughable to the Xenari. They had seen revolts before, and in every case, they had crushed them easily. A few isolated human colonies began organizing in secret, gathering weapons and resources, but nothing that posed any real threat to the mighty empire. The Xenari weren't concerned. They had conquered far more dangerous species than these primitive humans. The galaxy would bow, as it always had. Earth would bend its knee, or be wiped out. But the Xenari had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's stubbornness. The human spirit, unlike any other in the galaxy, refused to be broken. They were not conquerors by nature, but they were fighters when cornered. They were quick to adapt, to learn, and to fight for what they believed in. And they had something the Xenari didn't expect, a fierce loyalty to one another, to their planet, and to the ideals of freedom. It started with a small colony, a fringe world called Alpha 5, located on the far edge of human-controlled space. The Xenari had sent a reconnaissance team to keep the humans in line, but they hadn't anticipated the unexpected. The human colonists, fueled by a desire for survival and a determination to protect their homes, launched an ambush on the Xenari patrol. It was a risky move, brash and poorly planned, but it worked. The humans managed to disable a Xenari ship, capturing it and its crew. The Xenari didn't know how to react. In all their years of domination, no species had ever managed to capture one of their ships. It wasn't just a battle won, it was a declaration. The humans weren't as weak as they had assumed. They could fight back. Word of the victory spread quickly throughout human colonies, rallying those who had long felt powerless. The embers of rebellion were lit, and the fire began to spread. It wasn't a massive army, but it didn't need to be. The message was clear. Humanity would not kneel. They would fight, and they would win. The galaxy was about to learn the price of underestimating the human spirit. The first spark had been lit. The Xenari Empire would soon face a nightmare unlike anything it had ever encountered, and the universe would never be the same again. The victory at Alpha 5 sent shockwaves through the galaxy. To the Xenari, it was a minor inconvenience, nothing more than an embarrassing skirmish. They had suffered a loss, but it was an isolated incident, and they believed it would be swiftly forgotten. After all, their empire spanned entire star systems. They were the apex predators of the cosmos, and humans were nothing but insects in comparison. But humanity had other plans. The victory at Alpha 5 was more than just a tactical win. It was a A message that spread quickly from colony to colony, from system to system. The humans weren't just going to roll over. They were going to resist, and they would fight harder than the Xenari could ever imagine. Within weeks, small rebel cells began to form across human space. Some were military outposts, hidden deep within asteroid fields or the forests of uninhabited moons. Others were simply civilian groups who, inspired by the first victory, began smuggling weapons and supplies. Humanity's resilience was born from necessity. And soon, what started as a few scattered groups of fighters became a network, a revolution on the rise. It wasn't large enough to stand toe-to-toe with the Xenari just yet, but it was more than enough to get their attention. The Xenari's response was swift. They began launching coordinated attacks against human colonies, wiping out entire populations with brutal efficiency. Cities were turned to ash, space stations reduced to rubble. They thought that by destroying a few planets, they would break the spirit of the humans and quash the uprising before it grew out of control. But the humans refused to bend. Instead of crumbling under the Xenari's wrath, they adapted. They used guerrilla tactics, attacking in the shadows, hitting fast and hard before retreating to the safety of their homeworlds. They knew they couldn't defeat the Xenari in a direct confrontation, not yet. But they had something that Xenari didn't, the will to survive and the ability to outthink their enemies. The turning point came when a small fleet of human ships, led by a young commander named Evelyn Grant, managed to destroy a Xenari warship in a surprise attack. The humans had been studying the Xenari for years, learning their technology, observing their tactics, and finally discovering a weakness. The Xenari fleet was powerful, yes, but it was also arrogant. They had grown complacent, assuming that no one could challenge them. When the humans attacked, they exploited that arrogance, striking at their blind spots, catching them off guard. It was a bold move, and it should have been a suicide mission. The human fleet was small, underfunded, and inexperienced. But they were relentless, driven by a desire to prove that they were not just prey to the Xenari. They weren't the galaxy's weaklings anymore. The attack was a success. The Xenari ship was destroyed, its crew either dead or captured. The humans had proven their worth. It was the kind of victory that could change the course of the war. And it did. News of the destruction spread across human colonies like wildfire. The Xenari, stunned and furious, called for reinforcements. But humanity was already on the move. They didn't have the luxury of waiting for the Xenari to strike first. They would go on the offensive. The humans' message was clear now. They weren't just fighting for their homes anymore. They were fighting for their place in the galaxy. And this time, they weren't going to back down. The Xenari realized that the galaxy was about to change, and humanity was no longer the underdog. In fact, they were beginning to look like the galaxy's worst nightmare. As the war raged on, humanity's resolve hardened like iron. They had proven they could fight back. But the Xenari were not an empire to be defeated by small victories. They were vast, their fleets seemingly endless. The humans' unconventional tactics had earned them respect, but it was clear that the odds were still overwhelmingly against them. Despite their courage and ingenuity, humanity's forces lacked the sheer firepower to bring the Xenari to their knees. Then, deep within the archives of Earth's oldest and most secretive facilities, an ancient truth was uncovered, a forgotten relic from humanity's distant past, a weapon so powerful that its mere existence had been erased from history. The weapon was known only as Eclipse. It was buried beneath layers of deception, hidden in vaults so well protected that even the highest-ranking military officers had no knowledge of it. But the rising resistance, driven by desperation, managed to unearth the ancient technology. Eclipse wasn't just a weapon. It was a system of unimaginable power, capable of shutting down entire star systems. It could disable entire fleets in the blink of an eye, rendering entire armies useless in seconds. The implications were enormous. Eclipse could level the playing field with the Xenari, but it came with a terrifying price. The weapon was unstable, its mechanisms designed to disable the energy cores of entire planets. If unleashed, it could not only cripple the Xenaries' military might, but also destroy entire ecosystems, wiping out entire worlds in the process. Humanity's leadership was divided. Some saw Eclipse as the only way to guarantee victory. The stakes were too high, they argued. Humanity's very existence was on the line. They could not afford to play by the Xenaries' rules. They had to strike first. Others, however, were wary of using such a powerful and dangerous weapon. What if it didn't work as intended? What if the backlash destroyed everything? Was humanity ready to risk everything on a weapon they barely understood? For weeks, the debate raged, and tensions within the human leadership mounted. But as the Xenari fleet launched another wave of devastating attacks on Earth's colonies, the question became irrelevant. There was no time left for hesitation. A faction of military leaders, including the relentless Commander Evelyn Grant, decided to take matters into their own hands. With the support of a loyal group of scientists and engineers, they seized control of Eclipse and activated its core. The weapon was a marvel of ancient human design, a relic of a time long forgotten. The moment the Eclipse core came online, the effects were immediate. The weapon's energy rippled across the galaxy, sending shockwaves that disabled every Xenari ship within a vast radius. Communication systems went silent, and entire fleets were left drifting in space, powerless, as if their engines had been shut off with the flick of a switch. The Xenari were blindsided. For the first time in centuries, their seemingly invincible empire was paralyzed. They scrambled to understand what had happened, but it was too late. The humans had made their move, and it was devastating. But the aftermath of using Eclipse was not without consequence. As the weapon drained its power, it left behind an unstable core that threatened to collapse, causing ripples in the fabric of space-time itself. Humanity had unleashed an unstoppable force, but in doing so, they had crossed a line. There was no going back. The galaxy had been forever changed. Humanity had demonstrated not only their ability to fight, but also their willingness to take extreme measures to secure their survival. The Xenari, now reeling from the blow, realized they were no longer the galaxy's apex predators. In fact, they were staring down a new nightmare, a species that had just discovered a weapon capable of changing the very balance of power in the universe. And as the Eclipse core slowly began to destabilize, the humans knew their victory might have come at the cost of something much greater. The future was uncertain, and with every passing moment, the galaxy's fate hung in the balance. The Xenari had long ruled the galaxy with an iron fist, keeping countless other species in chains. From the insectoid Slarkians to the aquatic Aquari, entire races had been subjugated, their cultures erased, their populations enslaved. They were forced into labor camps, used as pawns in the Xenari's endless wars, or worse, consumed for sport. The Xenari's empire wasn't just built on conquest, it was built on the broken backs of countless oppressed species. But now, as the Eclipse weapon had turned the tide of the war, the Xenari's empire was unraveling. With their fleets disabled and their power slipping away, something unexpected began to happen. The other oppressed races, those long crushed under Xenari domination, saw an opportunity to rise. For the first time in millennia, they were no longer bound by fear. The humans' victory, the daring strike against the Xenari, had become a rallying cry for all the subjugated species across the galaxy. The news spread quickly. The Xenari, once the untouchable rulers, were no longer invincible. The oppressed species that had endured under their heel now felt a spark of hope, a glimmer that maybe, just maybe, they could break free too. The first to join the humans were the Slarkians, a fierce, reptilian species from the barren world of Zera 9. Slarkian warriors, once chained and forced to fight in Xenari arenas, were among the fiercest combatants in the galaxy. When they heard of humanity's victory, they immediately began to organize, their warriors gathering under the banner of the rebellion. They knew the cost of subjugation and were eager to strike back. Soon after, The Aquarii, a species of deep-sea dwellers with bioluminescent skin and tentacles like serpents, rose from the depths of their prison worlds. The Xenari had long used them for their unique talents in underwater warfare, but now the Aquarii saw their chance to break free. They joined the human resistance, offering their advanced water-based technology and their intimate knowledge of the galaxy's oceans to the growing rebellion. Then came the Drachthane, a race of hulking, horned creatures with immense strength, who had been used as slave labor to build the Xenari Empire's greatest fortresses. They had endured centuries of abuse, forced to work until their bones cracked, their muscles torn. The Drachthane had no love for the Xenari, and when they saw that humanity had successfully brought down one of the greatest empires in the galaxy, they too rose up. They tore down their chains, and with a roar that shook the heavens, they turned on their oppressors, eager for revenge. The Xenari were no longer just facing a rebellion of humans. They were now facing a coalition of the oppressed, a united front of species that had long been kept in the dark, used as tools, and abused in ways the Xenari could never fully understand. But while this newfound alliance between humanity and the oppressed species was powerful, it was also fragile. There were tensions, old wounds that hadn't healed, ancient grudges that flared up. The Slarkians hated the Drachthane for old wars between their peoples. The Aquarii distrusted the Slarkians, having once been betrayed by them in the past. And humanity, still trying to keep a delicate balance of power, feared that their new allies might have their own agendas. Despite these challenges, humanity was determined to keep the fragile alliance together. They were no longer fighting just for survival. They were fighting for freedom across the galaxy. And the oppressed races, tired of being crushed under the Xenari boot, were fighting for the right to stand on equal ground. The battles became more coordinated, the tide of war slowly turning. As humans and their new allies pushed back against the Xenari, they struck at the heart of the Empire. But with each victory, it became clear that the Xenari were not going to fall easily. They would fight to the bitter end, and every species under their rule would face the full wrath of the Empire's retribution. But the rebellion had already grown too strong. The spark that humanity had ignited had become a fire that spread across the galaxy. And now, the oppressed species, united under the banner of freedom, would never go back to being slaves again. The Xenari's empire was crumbling. And in its place, a new order was beginning to rise. A terrifying one, led by the very species they had once considered nothing more than insignificant creatures. The galaxy was a powder keg, and the fuse was burning fast. The Xenari, stunned by the uprising, were reeling, their empire fractured, and on the brink of collapse. The once proud race now found themselves fighting a war on multiple fronts. Humanity, their long-suffering slaves, and the myriad factions that had been waiting for this moment to strike. The balance of power was tipping, and it was only a matter of time before the Xenari would be forced to face their reckoning. Commander Evelyn Grant, the symbol of humanity's resistance, knew that the time had come for the final push. Humanity, along with their newfound allies, the Slarkians, the Aquarii, and the Drachthane, had fought tooth and nail to get to this point, but they were far from finished. The Xenari had proven time and again that they would not go down without a brutal fight, and the coalition forces were only just beginning to taste victory. The next move would decide everything. Grant stood before a war map, the holographic images of the galaxy flickering in front of her. The Xenari fleet had regrouped, now bolstered by the last of their loyal forces. The remaining bastions of the Empire, including their homeworld, Sirath, were fortified with military might that seemed insurmountable. Grant's forces were outnumbered, under-resourced, and still plagued by internal divisions. But she had learned something invaluable during the course of this war. Humanity, when pushed to the edge, was capable of the impossible. "We don't have the luxury of time," Grant said to her council. "If we don't strike now, the Xenari will regroup and consolidate their power. This could drag on for years. We need to hit them where it hurts, their heart." Xerath, the crown jewel of the Xenari Empire, was humanity's target. It wasn't just a planet. It was the heart of the Xenari's entire war machine, the place where their fleet's command structure and their most advanced technology resided. If they could disable or destroy Xerath, the entire empire would collapse. The plan was dangerous, almost suicidal. The Xenari had set up their defenses to be impenetrable, with an armada of warships and orbital weapons. But the humans had learned from the best. Xenari arrogance. They had studied their tactics, analyzed their weaknesses, and formulated a plan that would catch the Empire off guard. A small strike force, using stealth technology and guerrilla tactics, would infiltrate the core systems of Xerath, destroy the planet's primary power grid, and cripple its defenses long enough for the rest of the coalition to attack in force. Grant's strategy was bold, but it had a flaw. If anything went wrong, the entire operation would collapse in a matter of hours. The fate of the galaxy and all its inhabitants would rest on this one desperate strike. The human fleet, accompanied by the Slarkians' heavy warships and the Aquari's advanced submarine craft, moved into position under the cover of darkness. The Drakhthan, with their immense strength and unparalleled ferocity, would lead the ground assault, overwhelming the Xenari garrisons once the planet's shields were down. The tension was palpable as the fleet slipped into position. The Xenari never saw it coming. At the moment Grant had chosen, the coalition forces struck with everything they had. Waves of fire erupted as they engaged the Xenari's fleet, and the Xenari, expecting a simple battle, found themselves in chaos. The humans used hit-and-run tactics, exploiting the holes in the Xenari strategy. The Slarkian ships wove through enemy lines, attacking with deadly precision, while the Aquari's submarines sabotaged key orbital platforms and underwater installations. The Drakhthan unleashed their fury upon the planet's surface, crushing anything that stood in their way. The humans had no time to waste. As chaos reigned above and below the surface of Xerath, Grant's small strike team infiltrated the heart of the planet's defenses. They fought their way through the sprawling underground bunkers, dodging automated defenses and elite Xenari soldiers, to reach the core systems. The team worked quickly, placing charges in critical systems, plunging the planet into darkness. When the charges detonated, it was as if the galaxy itself had held its breath. Xerath's power grid flickered and died, the once impregnable planet falling into a state of disarray. The Xenari forces lost all cohesion, and without their command center, their coordinated defense crumbled. Now, the full force of the coalition attacked in waves. With their advantage gained, the rest of the resistance forces poured in, tearing through the Xenari's weakened defenses like a storm of fire. The skies above Xerath lit up with the explosions of battle as humanity and their allies fought tooth and nail to take control. For the Xenari, this was the beginning of the end. Their empire, once proud and unshakable, was unraveling. The humans had not only destroyed a symbol of their power, they had proven that no one, no matter how powerful, could remain untouchable forever. The battle for Xerath was a turning point. The Xenari could still fight, but they had lost their edge. Humanity had given the galaxy a glimpse of something more terrifying than anything the Xenari had ever imagined. A species that fought with the fury of survival and with the full force of a galaxy united against tyranny. The war was far from over. But now, for the first time, humanity could see victory within their grasp, and they would stop at nothing to take it. Xerath had fallen. The once unassailable homeworld of the Xenari was in ruins, its skies blackened with smoke and debris. The Xenari Empire, built on centuries of oppression and bloodshed, was crumbling in the wake of the relentless assault by humanity and their newfound allies. Yet even in the face of their imminent destruction, the Xenari were not done fighting. Emperor Kalis, the supreme ruler of the Xenari, had retreated to the depths of his palace, a towering citadel carved into the heart of Xerath. The man, or rather, the being, had ruled for millennia. his ambition and cruelty unchallenged by any in his empire. But now, for the first time, his vast empire was under siege by an enemy he had underestimated: humanity. Emperor Callus was no fool. He understood the stakes. His people, his empire, his very existence were all on the line, and he knew that if he could not rally his forces and crush this rebellion, the Xenari would be nothing more than a footnote in the history of the galaxy. In the high chambers of his palace, Callus stood before a massive viewport, gazing out at the chaotic battle unfolding in the skies above. His empire, the thing he had spent his life building, was crumbling before his eyes. His fleet was in disarray, his colonies falling one by one. Even his most loyal generals were beginning to question his leadership. "Is this how it ends?" Callus muttered, his voice a low growl, filled with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Beside him stood his most trusted advisor, Varel, a Xenari tactician, known for his cold calculations. Varel was one of the few who still believed in the Emperor's ability to turn the tide, but even he could see the writing on the wall. "My lord, the humans have struck at the heart of our empire. Their victory at Xerath was not an accident. It was a message," Varel said, his voice filled with urgency. "We cannot let them control the narrative. If we do not respond now, we risk losing everything." Callus turned to Varel, his eyes burning with a mixture of fury and determination. "What would you have me do, Varel? They are everywhere. My fleets are in disarray. They've outplayed us at every turn. I underestimated them, and now they've shown the galaxy that the mighty Xenari are nothing more than a paper tiger." Varel bowed his head, acknowledging the Emperor's words. He had never seen his ruler so vulnerable, so desperate. It was clear to him that Callus knew his empire was on the verge of collapse. "We have one final weapon, my lord," Varel said, his voice low, almost as if speaking to himself. Callus raised an eyebrow. "A final weapon?" Varel nodded. "A weapon hidden on the remote world of Volus 7. It is an ancient device, one capable of wiping out entire fleets with a single strike. If we can harness its power, we can turn the tide in our favor. But it will require us to act quickly and decisively." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "And what is the cost?" Varel hesitated for a moment before speaking. "The weapon requires a great sacrifice to activate. It is not without its consequences, but it may be the only thing left that can save us." Callus stood motionless for a moment, his mind racing. The humans had shown themselves to be unpredictable, formidable opponents. Yet, despite their tenacity, the Xenari had one final trick up their sleeve. The Emperor's voice was cold and determined. "Prepare my forces. We strike at Volus 7 immediately. If this weapon can secure our victory, then I will pay whatever price it demands." Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Commander Evelyn Grant and her coalition forces were preparing for their next move. The fall of Xerath had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, and the rebellion's momentum was at an all-time high. But there was little time to celebrate. The Xenari were not going to give up without a fight. Grant stood at the command center, surrounded by officers from various species, all working in unison to plan the next phase of the war. "We've hit them hard, but we know they're not finished. We need to prepare for whatever they throw at us next." She looked over to the tactical screen, where a series of reports came in from the front lines. Xenari fleets were still active, and word had spread of a new weapon being activated on the planet Volus 7. "This is it," Grant said, her voice steady but filled with concern. "They're going to make one last stand, and we need to be ready." The final battle was coming. The Xenari had one weapon left, and the humans and their allies had no choice but to face it head-on. The stakes were higher than ever. A victory would mean the end of the Xenari Empire, but the price of failure was unimaginable. As the forces of rebellion prepared to launch their next strike, the galaxy held its breath, knowing that the fate of an entire empire and countless species hung in the balance. The war had reached its fever pitch, and humanity stood at the precipice of something monumental. After the fall of Xerath, It seemed as if victory was within grasp. But deep in the heart of the galaxy, the Xenari Emperor Kalis was preparing to unleash his final, most devastating weapon. The one thing that could turn the tide back in his favor. The weapon, hidden away on the forgotten world of Volus 7, was humanity's new nightmare. Commander Evelyn Grant and her coalition had anticipated a counterstrike, but the true scale of the Xenari's desperation had yet to fully reveal itself. As her fleet neared Volus 7, her thoughts were consumed by the knowledge that this would be the defining battle of the entire war. There would be no second chances. "Intel reports are coming in, Commander," said Lieutenant Ilara, one of Grant's most trusted officers, standing beside her at the war map console. "The Xenari have begun mobilizing their last remaining forces. Something's happening on Volus 7, and we need to stop it before it's too late." Grant's eyes hardened as she stared at the swirling display of the galaxy, where the green pinpoint marking Volus 7 blinked ominously. The small, remote planet had been nothing more than an afterthought for years, tucked away at the outer rim of the Empire. But now it had become the focal point of the Xenari's survival. "What are we dealing with, Ilara?" Grant asked, her voice steady but heavy with the weight of responsibility. "It's not entirely clear, but reports indicate that the Xenari are activating a massive energy weapon," Ilara replied. "They've locked down access to the planet's core and are funneling energy from across their remaining colonies into some kind of superweapon. It's unlike anything we've encountered." Grant clenched her fists. She had seen the Xenari's might firsthand. Every battle, every sacrifice was made with the knowledge that if they couldn't defeat this empire, they would be enslaved or destroyed. This new weapon was not just a last-ditch effort. It was a declaration that Kalis would go to any lengths to secure his dominion, even if it meant annihilating the galaxy in the process. "We need to move fast," Grant said decisively. "Ilara, coordinate with the fleet commanders. Get every ship in position for a full-scale assault. We'll hit them hard and fast. No hesitation." The urgency in her voice resonated through the command room. And soon the entire human fleet, joined by the Slarkians, the Aquari, and the Drokthen, was ready to launch their assault on Volus 7. The Xenari had made their move. Now it was time for humanity to make theirs. On Volus 7, Emperor Kalis stood before the central control panel deep within the heart of the planet's main facility. The room hummed with power as the superweapon, codenamed Vortex, was primed for activation. It was an ancient device, constructed from technology beyond even the Xenari's understanding, powered by the very core of the planet itself. If fully unleashed, Vortex had the capability to create a singularity, a black hole that would tear apart entire star systems. Kalis watched the countdown on the screen, his heart pounding with anticipation. He had always been a conqueror, not a destroyer, but in his mind, this weapon was necessary. If he could use it to crush the human resistance, to wipe out the coalitions of the oppressed species, then he would reign supreme once more. "You have done well, my emperor," Varel said, standing at Kalis's side. "The weapon is nearly ready. Once activated, the galaxy will fall to its knees before you." Kalis's eyes were cold as he turned to Varel. "It must work. Failure is not an option. We will not be humiliated again." As the human fleet drew closer, Commander Grant's heart raced. The battle ahead was sure to be one of the most brutal engagements they'd ever faced. But as they closed in on Volus 7's atmosphere, something unexpected happened. A ripple in spacetime. A burst of energy. A low hum that reverberated through their halls. "We've entered the weapon's range." Ilara shouted. "It's starting. Vortex is activating." Grant's stomach twisted. The implications were horrifying. If they didn't stop the weapon now, Volus 7 would collapse in on itself, and the gravitational anomaly it created would consume everything in its path, human and Xenari alike. The entire fleet would be wiped out in an instant. "Move in," Grant barked, her voice a calm fury. "We're not letting them finish it. This ends here." The battle began in earnest. Waves of Zenari warships descended from the surface, launching a barrage of firepower, determined to protect their final weapon. But the human fleet, combined with their allies, was relentless. They cut through the Zenari lines with precision, exploiting every weakness and hitting their enemies where it hurt. Grant's fleet reached the surface, descending into the chaos of Volus 7's crumbling infrastructure. The superweapon's energy signature was stronger than ever, building towards something catastrophic. "We have one shot at this," Grant said, staring at the glowing red marker that indicated the core facility. "All units, attack. Disable the weapon. Now." As the ground forces rushed toward the control center, the tension in the air was suffocating. The fate of the galaxy, the survival of every species that had joined in this revolution, was tied to this moment. The Zenari were desperate, but humanity had fought for this moment, and they would not let it slip away. The countdown continued. Time was running out. The roar of battle raged through the atmosphere of Volus 7 as the human fleet, supported by their powerful allies, stormed the planet's surface. The ground trembled with the shockwaves of explosions, and the skies above were filled with the shimmering chaos of laser fire and burning wreckage. The Zenari had dug in deep, unwilling to surrender their final weapon. It was now a race against time. Commander Evelyn Grant, leading the assault, felt the weight of the universe pressing on her shoulders. She had seen horrors, lost friends, comrades, and entire worlds in the fight against the Zenari. But none of that had prepared her for the gravity of what they were about to face. Vortex, the weapon that could destroy entire star systems, was already humming with destructive power, its energy level spiking higher by the second. If it reached its peak, nothing could stop the devastation. "We're almost there, Commander," Lieutenant Ilara's voice crackled over the comm, her tone filled with urgency. "The Zenari are throwing everything they have left at us, but we're nearly at the control center. You need to hurry." Grant looked up at the crumbling landscape of Volus 7, where enormous Zenari warships fell like meteors, their engines sputtering and exploding as the coalition forces tore through them. Yet the deeper they pushed into the planet's interior, the heavier the resistance became. The Zenari weren't retreating. They were defending their very existence with a ferocity that bordered on madness. "Get the civilians to safety," Grant commanded, watching her forces charge ahead. "We can't afford to let Vortex reach full capacity. If that thing fires, we lose everything." As her team reached the control center, the massive structure loomed above them, a blackened fortress that seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of the weapon itself. The gates were reinforced with Zenari energy shields, crackling with violent energy. Standing at the entrance, Grant gritted her teeth, knowing that there was no turning back now. "Charge the disruptors," she ordered. The Druk then, with their immense strength, lined up alongside her, their weapons crackling with power. They slammed into the shields with all their might, forcing the barriers to flicker and fail under the onslaught. In a few moments, the path was cleared. Inside, the room was filled with a chilling hum. The core of Vortex was a shimmering, unstable mass of energy, held in place by Zenari technology, far beyond anything the human race had encountered. Control panels blinked frantically, warning lights flashing as the countdown to annihilation continued. "We don't have much time," Ilara yelled. "If we don't shut it down now, the entire galaxy will be in range of the blast." Grant's heart pounded as she surveyed the room. The complexity of the device was staggering, but she wasn't alone. Her team of specialists, both human and alien, scrambled to decipher the Zenari schematics. "The interface is locked," one of the engineers shouted, scrambling at the control terminal. "We need a code key to access the core system." "Where's the key?" Grant demanded. One of the Slarkian engineers stepped forward, a fierce look on his face. "We can bypass the security protocols. It will take time, but we can do it." "Do it. Now," Grant ordered. As the engineers worked quickly, the air around them grew thick with tension. The Zenari were not going to let the rebellion claim their ultimate weapon without a fight. The sound of marching boots echoed through the halls, and the facility shook with the impact of Zenari forces attempting to break through. "Grant, we're not alone," shouted a Drokthan warrior as he raised his weapon, targeting a group of Zenari elite soldiers advancing toward them. They'd come to make their last stand. "Hold the line," Grant shouted. "Just get that code. We can't lose now." The battle inside the facility was brutal. The Drokthan fought with unmatched ferocity, their massive fists tearing through enemies like ragdolls. The Slarkians and Aquari defended the engineers, using every ounce of their strength and knowledge to buy the team the time they needed. With every passing second, Grant felt as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Then, the moment she feared arrived. A low, vibrating hum emanated from the vortex core, signaling that the weapon was nearing its critical threshold. Almost there, one of the engineers gasped, their hands trembling as they typed furiously at the terminal. Just a few more seconds. Suddenly, the facility's alarms blared, and a booming voice echoed over the speakers. "You cannot stop it." Emperor Callus's voice was cold, filled with the arrogance of one who had ruled the galaxy for so long. "The destruction of your pitiful species is inevitable. Embrace your doom." Grant's breath caught in her throat. It was the final defiance of an emperor who refused to accept his defeat. But Callus had underestimated one thing: humanity's will to survive. "We're done," the engineer shouted. "I've broken through." The control panel flashed bright green, and for a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a deafening roar, the vortex weapon powered down, its deadly hum fading into nothingness. The countdown halted. The galaxy was safe. Grant didn't allow herself to breathe a sigh of relief just yet. The war was far from over, but this was a turning point. Suddenly, the building shook violently as a massive explosion rocked the facility. The Xenari had activated a final fail-safe, one last act of desperation to ensure their destruction. But Grant and her forces had already won. "Let's get out of here," Grant said, her voice unwavering. "We've just sent a message to the galaxy. The Xenari are finished." As they made their way out, Grant looked back at the darkened control center. The galaxy had been saved, but a new era was just beginning. Humanity had shown the universe that it was no longer a species to be dismissed. It had become the galaxy's worst nightmare, and its greatest hope.